Welcome to this Plato Madison lecture, Observing Black History Month, where we will hear from the president of Madison College, Dr. Jack Daniels III, about the college's role in promoting social justice in the community. We will hear about Madison College's long-standing work to be the leader in accessible, affordable education that meets the evolving needs of our diverse communities. He'll discuss the work to create an environment where racial equity and respect of differences becomes woven into the fabric of our culture, and the actions we must continue to take if we want to provide a learning environment that is fair, equitable, and just. I'm Joy Cardine, and I'm honored to be your moderator today. I will present your questions and thoughts to Dr. Daniels after he has finished speaking. So please post them in the Q&A section, which is located at the bottom of your screen. This forum is being recorded for the benefit of those who cannot be here today, and it will be posted later on the PLATO Madison website. We are so pleased that our Plato Madison member, Eileen Rabson, made the connection for us with Dr. Daniels so that we may hear from him today. Eileen has been a longtime supporter of the college and established a fund with the Madison College Foundation. The Eileen and Robert Rabson Scholarship Fund benefits students studying health education. So thank you, Eileen, from Plato and from Madison College and the students you are helping and from the entire community. So let me introduce our guest. Dr. Jack Daniels has a doctorate degree in psychology from the Wright Institute in Berkeley, California, and he is entering his 8th year as president of Madison College. His list of accomplishments here is lengthy. He has led the reshaping of the college in responding to unique community needs, and he is guiding the transformation of an institutional culture that practices and supports equity and inclusion. Among his notable achievements, he led the successful campaign to establish the Goodman South Campus on Madison's South Side. Thank you so much, Dr. Daniels, for being with us today.
Joy, thank you very much. I am very appreciative of the invitation to speak to you and share some of my thoughts, and then hopefully enter into a dialogue regarding social justice and or Madison College's work in being a leader in affordable education. I will make comments on how my experiences shape my perspective on social justice, the role of the community college, and what we are doing at Madison College to promote social justice. Social justice education involves promoting critical awareness of social inequalities and developing skills that work against these inequalities. Social action involves the interaction with individuals or groups organized towards social reform. Simply, there's an awareness component that leads to action to address social, economic, community, and educational inequalities. I have a good deal to share this afternoon. So I've prepared my remarks, not only to stay on track, but to generate further discussion. You know, my sense of social justice began as I grew up and experienced segregation in its most ugliest form, as well as racism. Growing up in Chicago, there were two worlds, mine and theirs. There were lines not to be crossed, because if they were crossed, most certainly would follow confrontations. And those lines oftentimes were geographic lines. And crossing over into those areas in which you were not a resident or you looked different than the folks in that area oftentimes caused the types of confrontations that I referred to. I went to a predominantly white institution, high school, which was college prep high school, which was located primarily in the inner city of Chicago. After attending a segregated grade school, where I was a better than average student, I found myself ill prepared to compete with my classmates when I initially entered high school. Most were well prepared. And it took me probably 3 semesters to finally get to a level where I could compete with my classmates. Out of 250 male students in my class, there were only 19 African American students, of which not all graduated. And to this day, I've had no contact with them or anyone else in my class. It was also during that time I found that our principal, who was a Carmelite priest, was very much involved in helping the poor in the neighborhoods to improve their quality of life. So when we think about these inequalities, it just didn't happen 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's been multiple lifetimes that this has occurred. I grew up in a neighborhood where, yes, neighbors would tell parents when they observed their children with aberrant behavior. And oftentimes it was me. I grew up in a vibrant Black community with shops, churches, restaurants, barber shops, furniture stores, shoe repair, small businesses, banks, all to disappear. Some to gentrification, and most always a disinvestment in economic and community development, and a disinvestment in education. And as these communities died, so did a great deal of community development, leaving lots vacant, homes neglected, and having an insecurity around safety. When I went to college, the racism I felt was in the community in which the college was located and how that community viewed a Black student, wherein there were only 3 African American students out of 1,000 students. It was also problematic in playing sports. I was an athlete. To the extent I could not travel with the baseball team on their Southern Spring Break tour because I couldn't stay in the same hotels as my teammates could. You start to see how this starts to shape my perspective when we think about social action and where are the gaps of inequalities that we need to be addressing. There are many more examples I can share relative to gentrification, racism, economic and community development gaps. But I wanted to give you a flavor of how my experiences have shaped my perspectives on social justice. As a side point, I lived in Miami for 3 years. I was early in my educational professional life, I was an assistant dean at Miami-Dade College. And I was at their downtown campus. The downtown campus was located in an area called Overtown. Overtown was that vibrant Black community in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s. They had hotels, shops, groceries, banks. By the time I arrived in the late 70s, early 80s, all of that had disappeared. But when that disappeared, people who were engaging in those areas disappeared too, and behaviors changed. And it was important for me as a very young administrator to address that issue of gaps and inequality to hopefully bring students back into an educational environment from which they could meet some of their goals. The bulk of my professional life has been associated with community colleges. One of the reasons that I left the baccalaureate graduate level institution was the connection that community colleges have with the communities they serve. Community colleges, technical colleges in this state, have a long history of serving their communities in many ways to minimize gaps. The offering of training, connecting with businesses for placement of students, providing classes in communities that focus on community and personal development, and speaking out when issues of discrimination and racism and societal disrespect presented themselves. I remember being in Oakland, California. In Oakland, California, one could say was the home of the Black Panthers. And when you start to think what the Panthers were doing within Oakland, and I'm talking about their free lunch, the schools that they presented, they were trying to address the issue of educational disparity, especially among young children of color. When I think through what had happened in Oakland during that time, you think about a community that is trying to grow itself and grow its community identity. And I think it's important as we think about these disparities, how has that impacted the identities of these groups? And I've seen this in Los Angeles, Houston, Chicago, and it's similar problems across the nation. And it's how we bring together those communities to effectuate change in those communities. And it's the same thing here in Madison. Is how do we bring communities together to effectuate change? You know, our role is to prepare individuals for careers that will propel them to greater economic subsistence for themselves and their families, along with meeting their own personal interests. Preparing for a career is just not for a technical college. It prepares for careers that require higher academic credentials. That's also our role. I have found that many don't see that. We transfer more students to the UW at Madison, as well as the entire system, than any other two-year institution in the state. And we're proud of that. Because it's necessary to build those blocks, to build those pathways, so that we can actually start to think through eliminating some of the gaps that we have. Madison College, in its efforts to prepare students for their next season, if you will, it's also important to recognize, as I have defined social action, to collaborate and to partner with those entities whose goal is to address social inequalities where they exist. Madison College has been at the forefront of social justice and more recently, social action. What are we doing at Madison College to promote social justice and action in our communities? The first action is internal. We know there were inequities internally. And the first step in social justice is becoming aware of those inequalities and the effect it has on individuals and the community. We recognize that as we move on the social justice, the social action continuum, it was important for us to focus on equity and inclusion. And I think this conversation within the college started roughly 6 to 7 years ago. And that conversation was about where was the greatest level of poverty in our city? And we knew that was on the south side of Madison. And when we looked at that, it's also getting an understanding what is the need of that community? How do we assist in bringing the community forward to have a greater quality of life? But how can we make some changes or participate in change around economic development? And we asked many residents, we asked business leaders, and that's how Goodman South Campus was born. It wasn't born because we just wanted to put a building up. It was born because there was a need and we needed to address that need effectively. And that's what I'm saying. Madison College has always looked at where the need is and then try to build efforts to meet that need. Over this past year, we have spoken out against racism and inequality in education. And we know of all the issues that the pandemic has brought us, but also the rearing of the ugly head of racism and how that affects our students. Our board of trustees took a very courageous step. And what they did was approve a resolution that denounced racism. I can tell you that our board leadership is in step with being active in providing direction to minimize these gaps. Internally, each school and division of the college is preparing an equity and inclusion plan that aligns with the overall college equity and inclusion plan. From an academic perspective, the equity and inclusion plan focuses on student success, curriculum design, hiring, and coordination with other college units to ensure alignment. In the fall of 2020, we actually appointed and established the first, what we call an ADO, which is an Academic Diversity Officer. That Academic Diversity Officer, who has a huge wealth of knowledge in students and curriculum and how do you infuse the curriculum with multiculturalism, has led the effort in the school's development of their inclusion and equity plans. We have two other major divisions. We have student affairs. And in student affairs, when I say student affairs, we talk about our programs that support and help retain students, our counseling, our advising, programs like TRIO programs for first generation students. We also have programs that focus in on a declining population. That declining population is the male population. Interesting enough, the population, male population, female population in our district, which is all a part of 12 counties, is roughly 50-50. We're down now to about 40-60, 40% male, 60% female. And what's happening with our young males, especially our young males of color? And we are focusing on them, surrounding them with as much wraparound services. And I define wraparound as the counseling, the financial counseling, the advising, all of those elements that help one be retained until they meet their goals, successfully meet their goals. So we're working from that standpoint with our student affairs. We also have the administrative services end of it. And that also includes things like IT. And how are we actually promoting and encouraging students to make their movement forward? One of the huge deficits, and this became very stark in the first few months of the pandemic, was access to the technology. And I guess I really should say access to devices that can access the technology. Because many folks did not have the funds to buy a computer, a laptop, a notebook. And so we provided over 1,200 laptops to individuals so that they could actually continue and learn how to be doing remotely in their classes. And we're going to continue that because that's huge, especially for those folks who have limited funds to do that. We also know that we have issues of broadband in many parts of our district. And we're working on solutions because it is about access. Because if we can't get the access, we cannot push the success. We've got to have you in class so that our excellent faculty can articulate their subject matter. That's also looking through what we have always termed the equity lens. And we need to look at, and we are looking at our college through that type of lens. Just as a side point, again, these plans are all due to me March the 1st. They will have timelines, expected outcomes, a methodology to assess and evaluate its effectiveness, its impact, or not. Because if it's not, then what interventions do we need to make that happen? There are 7 schools and 3 major divisions in the college. Each of them will have the same framework, though different goals and objectives. I think it's also key to point out, how do you get faculty involved in this type of, it's an initiative, but it's here to stay. It's not something that's here today and it's going to be gone tomorrow. So we have a department that focuses in on teaching and learning. And a lot of that is about the work that we do to support faculty, the professional development that we provide faculty. And we have worked a great deal with faculty over the years. It becomes much more pronounced during the pandemic, because not only we're preparing faculty to teach online, we're also preparing them how you engage online. Because it's that engagement that keeps students wanting to keep coming back, and they continue to meet their goals so that they're going to be successful. As I was thinking about the plans that we're being developed and created around institutional priorities, we believe that these plans need to be developed not just because of a person, it's institutional. Now, some of you may know Lucia Nunez. Lucia is the Vice President for Equity and Inclusion at the college. And through her office, there's a lot of training that's going on within the college, and it's focused on many different areas to ensure that we're looking broad-based in what we do. We have also taken the steps in overall hiring to concentrate on creating an employee base, faculty and staff, that is representative of the student population. Currently, our students of color population is approximately 30%. Shared governance is also very important to us. And we have a framework where we have a General Assembly and their councils. On each shared governance council, there's a minimum of one person of color that serves on that council. It's important to have committees and councils have multiple perspectives in order to grow and create good processes. When we think through this, we are looking at our budgets, the facilities, IT, human resources, campus and college-wide structures with an equity lens. An equity lens is a process that consists of a set of questions or a checklist of steps to utilize in decision-making in order to examine if the decisions will have an adverse impact on one group of individuals, specifically racial or ethnic groups. This lens is becoming much more important as we identify and we address gaps in our processes and how we engage individuals and groups. And this goes up and down our organization. Several years ago, 25 maybe, there was a focus in our community colleges nationally on what was called the Learning College. The Learning College basis was that everyone has an impact on the student, regardless if it's a faculty member, a staff member, an administrator. It could be a custodian. It could be a person who works in a bookstore. And how do you change a culture where everybody's objective is to ensure that students progress, that they be successful? It's the same basis as we think through our social action on the college campus, because everyone has to be a part of the equity and inclusion. It's just not one person. It's not just Lucia's role as a VP. It's not just the academic diversity officer. It's everyone's job to look through that equity lens and to be respectful and understanding differences that students have. And that's been permeated throughout the college, because that has an impact on students. That has an impact on eliminating some of the disparities that we find in education. You may be asking, what is the relationship at Madison College between equity and inclusion and being a leader in affordable education that meets the evolving needs of our diverse communities? It is important to have an accessible institution that is welcoming, sensitive to varied needs of a varied population, and creating an environment where students and employees feel respected, committed to excellence, and one that is fair, equitable, and just. It is not just sprouting the words, it's living it every day. That's why it's important to impact hiring using the equity lens. Research has proven that students who see employees that look like them do substantially better on the whole. That's why we have set goals to mirror our hiring to our student demographics. That means revamping our hiring processes to become trained and aware of implicit and explicit bias among committees that recommend employees to their respective campus leaders. This is why we work with our faculty in curriculum development and articulating specific subject matter with the understanding of historical and cultural biases. This is why the focus on equity and inclusion leads to an environment that is inclusive and respectful of differences. We believe that if we're doing these actions and communities, school districts, community-based organizations, and business become aware of what we're doing and supportive of what we do, there's a greater likelihood that students, many who have not had a good educational experience in the past, begin to look at Madison College in a different light. We want to be that caring institution, an institution that's truly committed to student success, not just in the classroom, but the impact it has on the psychosocial aspects as well. And the proof that we have evolved and will continue to evolve will be in the success of students and how we have truly transformed lives. If I go back to the definition of social justice and social action, it is addressing inequalities in our college and community. We work through our Entrepreneurial Center to better address needs that have been identified by the Latino and Black Chambers of Commerce. We are doing extensive work in how we better engage students and provide them the direction needed. And we are partnering and collaborating with businesses, educational entities from K-12 through graduate level institutions, and community-based organizations to address disparities from their vantage points. Subsequently, partnering on specific programs like dual credit with high schools and the STEM academies we have established makes a difference in students and the communities they live and work in. On July 1, we will roll out our refinement of our community relations component with a focus on African American, Latinx, Hmong, and Native American communities, and communities throughout our district that have been neglected. Additionally, we're creating an Institute for Equity and Transformation that allows us to do action research based on varied data, gathering strategies that focus on student success. This research is singularly focused on Madison College. It is our goal to learn from what we are doing and making it better. The actions we take very seriously with broad-based planning and an understanding of culture. Our institutional culture, as well as the culture of every employee and students that we're serving. Our average age is 26, and their interest is different from the traditional student. Yet, what all students want is an environment where they're respected, affirmed, and treated fairly. We do super work in our subject area knowledge, and we continue to learn on how we deliver what we know to an inclusive population. Madison College did not create this social justice, social action framework over the past few months. It is a hallmark of what we've been doing for years. And it's a team effort. It's collaboration with our small and large size businesses, community-based organizations, faith-based entities. It's a partnership with K-12 districts to ensure that the pathway to a student's future can be realized. The goal is to minimize disparities in education, economic development, and community development. I believe this is not just the work of Madison College. It's all of us in Dane County and the surrounding 12 counties we serve. Truly, we are all in this together. And I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Daniels. Thank you for sharing your personal story and what you are doing at Madison College and your leadership. We do have some questions. If you have a question or a thought for Dr. Daniels, please post it in the Q&A section. I'm going to start with a question from Tim, who says, while Madison likes to view itself as a liberal community, it has not done a good job in addressing the educational needs of communities of color. In this regard, what do you see as the major challenges we confront in addressing this issue? And how does this impact Madison College? So the gaps in achievement or opportunity are probably among the worst in the nation in Madison schools when it comes to whites and students of color. What are the major challenges as we confront this?
I think there are several challenges. I think one of the challenges is the faculty that we have teaching, and I'm talking more about K-12 right now. They're under a lot of pressure. And it's a pressure to produce, and we all want to produce. But you're dealing with students who have different experiences. They bring different things to the table. That's a challenge in itself. When you have a class and it's 25 students, and you've got 25 different personalities, you have 25 different sets of parents, you have 25 different experiences, how in fact do you work with each one of those students? And that is a challenge. For the first 3 years of my professional life, I taught sixth grade. And in teaching sixth grade in Chicago Public Schools, I had 40 students in my class. You can't work with 40 students effectively because they each bring something different. You can't work with 25 unless you have some assistance to do that. So I think that's a challenge for us to do. I think there is a challenge that we need to have more resources. And it's a challenge getting those resources. And much of that is legislatively driven. But we also know that we've got to be able to put some good steps forward to be able to do that. I don't know really what the demographic from a gender standpoint is with MMSD. I think one of the challenges is that you don't have a lot of males traditionally who are in K-12, especially with K-6. And I think it's a challenge to get folks who want to be involved with education. It's a challenge to get people to understand this is a great profession to get folks moving forward. And you can see that. I think the last challenge is really about economics. And it may be the first challenge, because when you think about students, and you got to think about their parents, and if they're working 2 or 3 different types of jobs just to put food on the table or to have a roof over their head, what time do they have to spend time going up to the school and talking to instructors? The time they have to work with their students, I think, is minimal in many instances. We see this during the pandemic. I see it with my own faculty who have children at home. And they're under such stress to not only work with their children who are trying to learn remotely, but also doing whatever their day job is. So I think the economics also plays a role in this.
How do the educational gaps in K through 12 affect or impact Madison College?
One of those impacts would be the ability to matriculate effectively through the college environment. Because if we get a number of students who need developmental courses, it delays their ability to matriculate. Now, there's been a lot of talk about developmental courses and how universities want to get out of that game. But I think we have to realize that is an issue that we have, and how are we going to help solve that issue? One of the things I think is important as we talk about students who come to us with not having college skills is, how do we actually keep them engaged as they get their college skills so they can be successful? You know, we have a wonderful academy, STEM Academy. We have 200 students, Madison Metropolitan School District students, who attend the academy at our Goodman South campus. Last year, I think the average number of college level courses, or the number that the units that they had achieved, was somewhere around 48 to 52. That's key, because it takes 60 to get your associate's degree. And we had, I'm going to say 15 to 20 students who actually got their associate's degree at the same time they got their diploma. It's providing those opportunities to students that's going to be helpful to those students. And when they're coming to us, they already have that knowledge. They already know how to do college because they are in the college as that high school student.
That's great. Eileen wants to know, are you collaborating with Tommy Thompson, the interim president of the UW system, who has proposed recently, by the way, more consolidation between the UW system and technical colleges?
Am I working directly with former Governor Thompson? No. I know that our Wisconsin Technical College system, and if everybody's read the article, you know what Dr. Foy has said. I do have that connection with the former governor because through his philanthropy, we have our SIM Center, which is at Truax, which is named after him. And we've had, brief discussions on how students move forward. But I think at this point in time, that's something that I'm going to let our president of the WTCS deal with. So,
you did mention in your remarks that Madison College sends more students to UW-Madison and other UW system campuses than any other two-year institution, though. So, and you also mentioned that not everyone thinks that's a good idea or thinks that's necessary, but you're proud of that. Talk a little bit more about that.
We have dual mission. I'm proud of the instruction that we provide students so that they'll be successful at the UW or any other four-year institution for that matter. We know that our students who transfer do better than the native student. And we've got data to back that up. And that's a national phenomena of community colleges. So yes, I'm very proud, but I'm also equally as proud of what we do in our trades and technical. The work that we do with sustainability, the work we do with transportation, advanced manufacturing. We also have a vibrant apprenticeship programs, putting folks to work with the skills so they can be retained in the workforce. And so, we are probably much more of a comprehensive two-year institution than any. And we serve both. And I know that my colleagues in the other 15 colleges, technical colleges, are doing similar great work based on what they're doing in terms of their training and meeting the needs of business and industry.
You said that you have 30% of the student population, that 30% are students of color, and you want to meet that when it comes to faculty. Do you know how many faculty of color you have?
Like most institutions of higher ed, that's where you have the huge disparity. I think our faculty of color is somewhere around 10 to 11%. We have a lot of work to do in this area. We have a lot of work to do in the part-time area as well. What we'll find is that you probably have more staff of color proportionately than any other level. And I'm using staff as administrative assistants, those folks who work the frontline people, as opposed to the faculty. But that's always been a concern and an issue for us, is hiring those faculty. And hiring faculty is key to what we do, but it's difficult. And I'm not saying that's impossible. I will never say that. I say our outreach has to be much greater, and the connections that we have must be greater to do that.
Mary writes, being an alumnus of MATC, Madison College, I would not be where I am today if not for this community college, especially since I did not have the opportunity to continue my formal education. This past Tuesday, while in Milwaukee, President Biden said again that he wants to have free tuition for two-year colleges. The First Lady, Jill Biden, is a long-term teacher in a community college and plans to continue to teach. What kind of impact would this have on Madison College and our community, presuming the free tuition?
Right. That's a good question. And I think they have to really define a way to do that and not have that effect, a negative effect on what we get from the state. You know, being in California in the 70s, it was practically free. But that was for every segment of the UC system, CSU, and our community colleges in California. I think there's a lot to be said about that. I think we need to tie some of that into their success and their retention. And what are we going to put around them so that they will be successful? We have what is called a promise program, much like the Bucky promise that UW has. And our promise program is funded purely from private donations. And those students who come through the promise program have done fairly well. We've had it for 3 years. If they graduate in good standing, they then go on to UW, and the Bucky program will kick in. And so they have no tuition and fees for 4 years. I think those types of programs are going to be effectual. But I think you got to really look at and drill down to what those issues may be from a zero perspective, and what does it mean to have no tuition and fee and free college, if you will.
Another attendee wants to know if Madison College has an alumni association, and if so, how it might be supporting your efforts.
There are probably 1,150 some odd two-year colleges in the country. And I would tell you less than 3% of them have alumni associations, primarily because of the transient nature of the student. That does not say, however, that we don't make efforts. And so those efforts are coming out of our Madison College Foundation to continue to try to address and to connect with alumni of the college. And I know some businesses, and I'll just give an example, that also has a high number of Madison College alumni working in those businesses. The interesting thing for me when I came here 8 years ago was any place I went, I could see there was a Madison College graduate. I go to my dentist, and the dental hygienist is a Madison College graduate. I go to UW Medical, and the nurse there is a Madison College graduate. I go to the store, and I see the person they're working in the store, they're Madison College graduates. I even went to a restaurant where folks were working, they're Madison College graduates. I went to AmFam, I think it was 2 years ago, and they had somewhere in the vicinity of 200 alumni of Madison College. And I had an opportunity to talk to them. So they're out there. I know they're out there, over 110 years old. I know they're there. And we do need to do more in terms of bringing them together, not just because there's an issue that we're trying to do, but because they provide so much to us. And they're great advocates.
Another attendee wants to know if there is a role in any way for mentors from the community to work with individual students at Madison College.
Without question. We're seeking mentors in many of our student services programs. When I talked about TRIO before, we talk about, there's what is called Men of Excellence that focuses on Latinx and African-American males. There is a science club that looking for mentors as well. I think mentoring is essential in many ways. Highly supportive of it. And I think we need to do more of that. And there are ways to connect with the college for those mentoring opportunities.
I assume you can find a place online to email.
I'm trying to think.
That's okay. Well, I'm sure that if you do a search, you probably can find it.
Well, I think if you go to our directory, um, Renee Alfano, that's Alfano, is probably the person at least you can start the connection with. She's the director of our student life.
Good. What percentage of your students receive scholarships in order to attend classes? And what are the demographics of the scholarships?
I don't have an answer for that. I know that roughly 40% of our students are on Pell Grants. We do about $1 million, a little bit north of $1 million in scholarships. And it all comes out of the foundation. And I know they're quite a bit, they're quite a few, but I can't tell you numbers or percentages.
I saw you in October presenting before a virtual forum during the Cap Times Idea Fest. And you were talking a little bit about the effort that you led to establish the Goodman campus on the south side of Madison. It wasn't easy. A lot of people did not agree with you that we needed to have the campus moved to the south side.
Well, that's true. It's when you know something is right, you continue to move forward with it. The key here was about the need. And we weren't serving the need at Truax campus of those students who were in the South. And we had gotten out of our West campus off of Mineral Point and Gammon. And so those students would have difficulty coming into the Truax. Many of those students don't have vehicles, so they rely on public transportation. And oftentimes it takes 2 hours one way to get there from where they were. And we need to have a facility that meets the need. And those needs are everything from access needs, transportation needs, to providing the types of programs where folks can actually get the skill training necessary. When we opened that facility, we were only planning somewhere between 12 and 1,500 students. The first semester we had over 2,000 students. And the way that that campus was built, it was built to be honorable of the cultures that were in South Madison. And that's all the cultures. So it was a joy when we opened those doors. And it will be an additional joy when we get to open them again to the extent that we had pre-COVID.
Almost out of time, but do you know when that's going to be? Are you talking about reopening, doing in-person learning as opposed to virtual?
That's probably when I was growing up, they used to talk about the $1 million question. I think it's a $1 billion question. I just don't know. This year, we had 75% of our classes were fully remote, 25% were hybrid, and 5% were still face-to-face. If in fact we can continue to see progress against the pandemic and the vaccinations become much more available, not just in 1A and 1B, or what's 1C through E, I think then we start to look at other ways that we become much broader to do the in-class types of situations. If we continue down this pathway, and our folks are working on this daily, it may be that we can increase that face-to-face from 5% to 15%. Because we know that many students learn much better when they're in that type of environment. And we want to provide everything we possibly can to ensure the success of students. And I think that's important. I have students who talk about the socialization aspect. You know, I understand we go to college to get a degree, but there's also socialization around the college. But there's socialization around the employees. And this has been a very stressful, and it's a huge issue regarding the mental health. And so as we look forward to the future, hopefully that we are making the progress whereby we can start to inch back to whatever will be the new normal. But also understanding that we will never go back to where it was.
So speaking of the future, how hopeful are you that Madison will make some big strides when it comes to social and racial justice and equity?
I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged when I talk to business leaders and what they're doing. And it's not just about lip service. They're making some huge efforts to really focus in, not just on their own areas, but what is the impact in the community. I have a lot of respect for what United Way does, and I think they're going to be a major partner. They are a major partner in helping us move through these elements. I know we have a new school superintendent, and though I have not had that opportunity to have a detailed conversation with him, what I have observed is moving in a directed framework and pathway to actually try to, let's look at how do we better our institution, MMSD, so that students are going to be successful, knowing that they have to go to a post-secondary institution. And I see that from Sun Prairie to Oregon to Verona, Milton. I think they're all working for that. I see that encouragement. I see things that are happening that gives me hope that we will be focused on eliminating as much as we can these disparities. It's not going to happen overnight, and it has to be a continuum. I also think from an economic development standpoint, there are some things that are starting to look, again, encouraging for what we're doing, especially in communities of color. So I'm encouraged, and I will always maintain that encouragement and those partnerships. And I think that as a college, we will be engaged in those discussions.
Well, that seems like a good spot for us to leave it for now. Dr. Jack Daniels III, thank you so much for being with us today.
Joy, thank you very much for the invitation.
We will be posting the recording of this forum on the PLATO Madison website, so you can go back and look at it again or let others know that they can see it there. Our next lecture, I believe, is going to be on March 18th. We are going to be talking about retirement and how we can have a happy retirement with the author of a book on retirement. So that's on March 18th at 1 o'clock. So check out the website and register for that if you'd like.